Protesters from India's youth-led cockroach movement are pushing back against police use of AI-powered surveillance during recent demonstrations in the capital.
A petition before the Delhi High Court has sought the immediate destruction of all biometric data collected and that the court declare mass surveillance unconstitutional. Delhi police say AI helps them estimate crowd size and identify people with criminal history. They say they've already identified at least 40 women with criminal records who allegedly took part in the protests in the national capital.
Activists say India has no law governing police use of facial recognition technology, and the surveillance at the main protest site in New Delhi breached existing legal protections. Now, the government says such checks were legal and in the public interest to maintain law and order. For more, we are joined by Simon Chesterman, the David Marshall Professor and Vice Provost at the National University of Singapore and AI Governance and Policy Lead at the NUS AI Institute. Thank you so much for joining us, Professor. So the legal challenge in India really highlighting growing concerns over AI-powered surveillance. I mean, as more countries deploy these technologies, how much is too much? Where should the line be drawn?
Well, I think this is a debate around the world because AI and technology like this in general can accelerate things in a way that renders our old norms and expectations obsolete. So if you're out in a public space, you have no right to prevent someone just taking a photograph of you. And so we've seen photographs of the protesters in India, for example. That's not particularly controversial. What is controversial is the use of real-time biometric surveillance to identify, track, record, and possibly then prosecute them. And so around the world, this ability to process information in real time, keep a record, means that it's not just your ability to go and take a photograph in the public, but the ability of the police and law enforcement agencies to record, identify, and track everyone who's there. And so in other jurisdictions, this has been debated. The European Union's AI Act, for example, prohibits real-time biometric surveillance, except in very limited circumstances. And some of your listeners might remember the debate between Anthropic and the Pentagon in the United States, where Anthropic had two red lines for not using its AI systems. One was lethal autonomous weapons, and the other was mass surveillance of the kind that we're seeing in India. So there are debates about this. Clearly, the police find it useful. And I suppose the question is whether that utility to the police in maintaining public order outweighs the chilling effect it would have on any individual who thinks about going to a protest, knowing now that it might not just be the chance of them being photographed, but the likelihood of their name, identity, and so on being located and tracked by law enforcement.
Professor, I just want to digress, very quickly, if I may, from where the lines are in governance to something we've noticed as well. I'm not sure whether this is recent, fabricated disaster footage. It was spreading very quickly after Typhoon Noel struck in China. Is this something new, or is this already a growing pattern that you see already for recent crisis and extreme weather cases?
Yeah, so AI is great for analyzing information, also for generating information. So no, this is not particularly new. It's quite common in the past because when there's a major incident, there's a real demand for footage, information. And if people don't have verified real-time information, sometimes they'll just present old information. We've seen that many times in history. Just recently with the Iran war, for want of footage, people were posting video game footage or footage from previous wars. Last year in Hurricane Melissa, we saw fake videos of sharks in swimming pools and so on. So this is not particularly new. What is different is the scale and speed, the ability to generate ever more realistic information at speed, which can really complicate disaster recovery efforts, because one thing that you need in the aftermath of a disaster is verifiable real-time information. So that can be useful if you can get good information. And we saw drones being used, for example, in China to deploy relief activities and support the recovery. But all of that's made much more difficult if there's a kind of fog of war because of the amount of fake information being circulated.
Okay, so Professor, why do AI-generated fakes gain traction so easily during these times of crisis and disaster?
Well, I think it's natural that people are curious. They want to see information. And one of the challenges that AI creates is it's ever easier to generate the precise information that will push people's buttons, that will get them excited, make it more likely to share. You can now, with pretty widely available technology, generate not just one video, but multiple videos, work out which one's going to get traction, and then send that out. So this is a lot more complex than the old days where people would be going through the archive trying to find some similar suitable footage or video game footage. It can be tailored to the particular thing that will press people's buttons, and that's what gets you traction on social media, unfortunately.
I'm going to ask you about the blame game now, Professor. Some say it's China because its AI sector is scaling generative tools faster than anyone else. They also say Beijing pioneered the use of widespread surveillance on its citizens. Are they really to blame, or is it really that governments have fallen behind in terms of keeping bad actors in check, and coming up with proper AI policies and guidelines that balance legitimate use and rights violations?
Yeah, so I'd separate out the question of surveillance, where, yes, China has deployed a pretty robust surveillance apparatus, although 25 years ago, when I was living in the United Kingdom, the UK had very elaborate cameras throughout London and so on. So there is surveillance, and that is a growing industry. But in terms of the deepfakes, you're right that Chinese AI companies have lowered the cost. But I wouldn't really attribute this just to Chinese companies. We've seen, for example, in the United States, rich debates about what limits, if any, to put on the generation of fake videos, with Elon Musk's Grok being among the most enthusiastic developers of fake videos. So I think relying on individual companies or even individual countries to regulate this really isn't going to work because it's a global problem. Now, the academic in me would say, ideally, everyone's educated, thoughtful, and uses their critical faculties to determine whether something's believable or not. The realist in me says that's probably not enough. Nor is it enough to rely on individual companies, and countries also need to coordinate. So there are efforts through the United Nations, for example, to develop information integrity protocols, to have common standards. But I think the past idea that we could identify fake videos, I think that ship has largely sailed. The ability to generate ever higher quality videos makes it almost impossible for AI to detect fake videos, right, and pretty much impossible for humans. So rather than identifying the fake, we need to label the true.
Okay, so which leads me to this question of liability. Is it also equally distributed? Because if a fake goes viral during the next crisis and slows down an evacuation or causes some fatalities, who's going to be blamed? Is it the platform that hosted it? Is it the government that failed to preempt it? Or is it the AI company, whose tool actually made it?
Yeah, well, it would, of course, depend. But if there's a bad actor who did something with bad intent, then obviously you should go after them. The problem is they're often very hard to identify. So I do think there is a question of responsibility of platforms. And we've seen their ability to address at least some of these concerns by their efforts to limit the spread of pornography, in particular child pornography. So it is possible to limit. The question is, what is their incentive? And their incentive at the moment is to err on the side of greater engagement. So outside of very clear lines like pornography, if they're able to get more viewers, more traction, more likes, their incentive is to share those videos when in doubt. And so probably it does require government, and it requires government to act in a way that will not just rely on the good nature of these companies, but establish meaningful incentives to get them to take down fake videos quickly, punish users who spread fake videos, and where necessary, to preemptively slow down the movement of videos where the provenance is uncertain before harm can be distributed around the world.
Okay, Professor, we've got a minute on the clock right now. And beyond the governments and the tech companies can do, there's also the role for the public, right? I mean, what are the most effective ways for people to distinguish between real and fabricated content, especially during a very fast-moving crisis?
Yeah, well, so you're right that it's fast moving, and the problem is that lies travel around the world while the truth is still putting on its tying up its shoelaces. So I think the key thing is if something looks too good to be true, it probably isn't. And if something's really exciting, something really gets you engaged, and you think, "Gee, I've got to tell all my friends about this," then maybe that's the moment to pause and think, "Well, why? Where does this come from? How verifiable is it? Do I know the source? And does this seem realistic?" And if any of those questions give you pause, then maybe you should look for an alternative source and at least hesitate before contributing to the flow of this fake information around the world.
Understood, Professor. Thank you very much for your insight this morning. Simon Chesterman, AI Governance and Policy Lead at the NUS's AI Institute.